Recording, or I guess we can start the recording. Don't see Clancy is on yet, so I guess we'll have to wait for Clancy to really start the meeting. I don't know about that. Whether it sticks an experience. Good. All right, Clancy, let me pull up the agenda. We can get started.
All right. Let's see. Do we is it just me and Laurie? Do we have other? Oh, there's Joy signing on.
Lisa Jensen is the new person coming in for Planning Commission, and she's here.
Oh, awesome. Welcome, Lisa. We'll do an introduction for you here in a minute. Let's see. I want to wait for Joy to get on audio here. Well, I can start reading this. Sorry, can't I? Do I read this whole page or just the top part?
You can just read for the hybrid meeting protocol. You can just read that below where it says hybrid meeting protocol.
Got it. Okay. Due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and Utah County's high level of coronavirus transmission, the Provo City Transportation and Mobility Advisory Committee has determined to hold hybrid meetings with an anchor location and online. We invite interested persons to participate online by watching the live broadcast at YouTube Provo Channel 17 and Facebook Provo Channel 17, or at Provo City's Public Works Building, Conference Rooms 3 and 4. To send comments to the committee or weigh in on current issues, email them to jjohnson@provo.org. And for today, at least, I'm going to try to monitor the YouTube broadcast just in case we see comments there. Like we talked about last time, I don't know, we may not always address them, but we'll try to keep our eyes on them and address them when we can. Introductions here. So I'm Clancy, TMAC chair. We've got Joy McMurray, vice chair, who is working on audio, it looks like. Dave Arnold, TMAC committee member. Looks like there's Jim joining audio as well. And Greg McFarland emailed me that he would be late to the meeting, but attending. And then we've got Laurie and Lisa from Planning Commission, and then staff. And Rob, is that all staff there with you, or are there any members there in the room?
Well, we have Bill Miller from the city council.
Oh, welcome.
Good afternoon, Clancy.
Yeah, welcome, Bill. And you're taking, I guess I'll go officially to item 1 here now. So yeah, welcome to Bill Fillmore, our new city council liaison. We're happy to have you here, Bill, and appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
You want to introduce yourself or share anything?
No, not this time. Thank you.
All right.
Francie, you want me to go through what staff are over here?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. We've got Joseph, who is part of the public information team. Rob Hunter, the transportation engineer. Gordon Hayes, city engineer.
Johnson, I'm here to take minutes. No, please spell everybody's name right.
Henrie is here to do a presentation.
David Bay, development engineering. That's it.
Over at Community Neighborhood Services, Development Services, we have me, Hannah Salzl, but also Melissa McNally and Javin Weaver just off camera, just so you know, there are more people in the room.
Other hands.
All right, thank you all. And then, yeah, welcome to Lisa Jensen. You want to introduce yourself, Lisa?
I'm Lisa Jensen. I've been on the Planning Commission for, holy cow, I think 2 years now. I don't know what you want to know about me.
Well, that's great. Thanks. We're glad to have you. So, Laurie, are you no longer our commission representative after this then, or I assume that's what's happening here?
Yeah, Rob asked me to overlap for a couple months, so I'll be here. I'm here today. I'm actually in the public area, so I probably won't talk a lot. And I'm planning to come in March, but I have a conflict in April.
Okay.
So that might be my last one.
All right. Well, we'll see you again, but thanks so much today for all your contributions over the years, Laurie. We appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it, so I hope Lisa does too.
Yeah, yes, definitely. So I think we're good with item 2 there then, unless staff had anything to add to that. All right.
On item 2, the only feedback that we got was that we had Lori's name wrong, so it's corrected on the on an updated meeting minutes.
Okay. And I was able to review the minutes, so I'll motion that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I second.
All right, we have a second from Jim. Before we vote, are there any comments or anything that need to be brought up? Okay, for what it's worth, I did get an email from Greg that he reviewed them and was good with them. So I think the easiest way to vote is to kind of roll call style this. So this is Clancy and I vote yes. Jim?
Yes.
Dave, Arnold?
Yes. Yes.
And Lisa, you weren't here, but I guess this would be your vote.
I was going to abstain.
Okay. And Joy, we still don't have Joy on audio. But I guess for the vote itself, that is a majority of those present, so the motion passes, correct? Okay. All right. I'm wanting to make sure Joy can be part of this, but I'm still waiting for her to be on audio.
Well, I'll just send her a chat. Hopefully she can connect here, but send her a chat just saying that, reminding her that she can use chat as long as she can hear us, that she can got some comments or something, she can post those in chat. Yeah,
that's a good idea. She could just chat on Zoom, and she could even jump on YouTube to watch if she wants to that way. Okay, well, I guess we'll move to item 3 then, the conservation and resiliency plan. So I believe that's you, Hannah, so go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Would you mind giving me permission to share my screen? I've got a presentation here to walk through some of the major numbers.
Just stop share on my end and you should be able to do it on your.
All right, we're rolling. So The Conservation and Resiliency Plan was originally part of the general plan, but it seemed like this was a really important topic to Provo residents, but it was also a topic that deserved a little more nuance than we could give it as part of this huge general plan that we're trying to keep very slim. So we spun it off into its own, which makes it Provo's first sustainability plan, which is huge. And I don't know of any other cities in this area that have sustainability plans yet, although there are a few that are starting to work on them. So we really are leading the way in this area. We called it the Conservation and Resiliency Plan simply because we felt like that captured some nuance better as we're talking about not just conserving our natural spaces, but also helping us build a more resilient future environmentally, economically, and socially. Points really fast about sustainability, kind of some of the nuance we were trying to discuss outside that general plan. And then we'll go through the sections and targets that are most relevant to TMAC and some of the implementation and goals. So sustainability really is based on 3 pillars. This is not Provo's philosophy. This is a pretty globally accepted standard definition, looking at, again, social, environmental, and economic long-term best practices, essentially making sure that our needs are met now, but also that we are meeting our needs in such a way that we don't diminish our capability of meeting those needs in the future. That's exactly what a lot of Provo residents said that they wanted. A lot didn't use the word sustainability, but they talked a lot about this idea. Conservation Resiliency Plan, just so you know, like a general plan, it is just long-range visioning. It's strategic, it's inspirational, it's a framework for interdepartmental collaboration as well. It is not legally binding in any way. It does not set any budgeting policy. It is not just like a green plan or entirely land use. It's intended to touch on lots of different aspects. It is, under the general plan, sort of a support plan to things like the Transportation Master Plan, Parks Master Plan, things like that, but then hopefully will influence other plans in that hierarchy like area and neighborhood plans, and then regulatory codes. There are 8 major plan elements that we try to discuss in the brief 70 pages or so of the Conservation Resiliency Plan. They are the ones in red boxes are the ones that we thought were most relevant to TMAC. Carbon footprint, air quality, renewable energy, environment, waste, water, mobility, and fire risk. Looking at it, this snapshot really is the essence of the Conservation Resiliency Plan. Each element then has its own chapter where it explains a little bit more about Provo's unique situation and gives recommendations. And then at the very end, there's a list of goals and strategies for implementing them for each of the elements. You can see here for these targets, there's the baseline where we're at right now as far as we can tell. Some don't have any data. Our goals for the next 10 years and our goals for the next 30 years out. Moving into the plan elements that involve TMAC a little bit more.
What is VMT? I just want to make sure I know.
VMT, let me go back, is travels. It's an approximation for simply how much people are driving in your community. And this
So we want to decrease the driving mobility? Is that what this is?
Yeah, I'll get a little bit more into that when we get into the mobility section about some of the strategies we're talking about for reducing VMT. Cars are still probably going to be the dominant mode of transportation around here, just because of the way that we're laid out in the infrastructure we have. But there are still ways we can reduce vehicle miles traveled or make them more efficient when we have to have them. And this is sort of a metropolitan area. It's been difficult to get it for Provo specifically. There's some Google data we could request that we're working on, but we won't have it for this plan. But it'd be useful going forward. For carbon footprint, we'll start off there. Actually, you know what? We already kind of jumped into mobility. Let's just keep going with that. So major contributors, the main one is cars and vehicle emissions, especially single occupant vehicle trips, which is the main thing to reduce because we cannot reduce all driving down to 0 or anywhere close here. That's just not going to happen. So that's what we can really focus on. Some of the potential solutions are reducing these with shorter trips, like having more strategic routes and reducing idle times, strategic like lights, stop signs, and things like that, making sure that the routes people travel get them there with the fewest emissions possible. And again, reducing single occupant vehicle trips where there's only one driver in the car. We can also work to make better use of the roadways we have. Public Works is doing a fantastic job with that, with bike lanes and bus lanes where appropriate, making sure that our roads that we have are working to their best capacity. And of course, promoting and supporting more sustainable modes of transportation, which we're already doing and will definitely continue to do in Provo. This just helps set some more specific goals for that. One cool fact that I just learned the other day, Super Pedestrian, who handles all of our electronic scooters that you've seen around Provo, sent us our stats for 2021. The scooters have traveled approximately 190,000 miles in 2021, which is the equivalent of just a little bit over 78,000 kilograms or 86 tons of CO2 emitted from the air if those had all been car trips. So we're already working on reducing car trips and seeing some great success. Backing up to the others, carbon footprint. Some of the major contributors are vehicle emissions and building energy consumption. The others in that list are sort of secondary or tie in with building energy consumption, but really what TMAC can focus on is those vehicles. Potential solution include, again, like we talked about with mobility, promoting alternative modes of transportation, reducing, they're called SOVs in the document, those single occupant vehicle trips, promoting alternative modes and electric vehicles, especially, which have a, once they're produced and on the road, net zero emissions. Strategic planning to reduce emissions from vehicles like we talked about in mobility. You'll notice the goals in this section too also focus more on the buildings, simply because, as you saw in the mobility section, there's a little bit more of a focus there just in the other element of the chapter. It's there, just not as much in this section. The last one that really touches on TMAC's work is air quality. Obviously, vehicle emissions are a major contributor to that. Some elements are out of our control, like the effects of inversion that worsen what we already put out there. Wildfires, especially like we saw from California last year, that dumps so much particulate matter into our air. We have no control over that. Taking steps where we can still reduces the overall particulate matter in the air, still improves air quality. As you're reading the document, it's important to note that air quality has decreased over time. So we are continuing with that decrease we've seen over time since we started tracking in the 60s, and then going a little bit more aggressive to make sure that we're really doing all we can, especially as we grow as a city, that we're planning for strategic growth, again, to make sure that our children, grandchildren can enjoy the same high quality of life that we have, if not better. And again, seasonal variations, as it says in the notes there, do affect the average. So just be aware of that as you're reading through the document. Implementation, I won't read this whole statement because it's in the document that you were sent with all of the updated goals, but it's essentially reminding the reader that Provo's already doing great work, and we have always been a regional leader and literally pioneering, and there's no reason to stop that now, especially with something as critical as the quality of life that we enjoy and that we hope our children will enjoy. And again, reminding the reader that this is not legally binding in any way. These are visionary goals. Just a quick note as you're reading through, I won't go through all of the goals with you because you have those, but we have gotten some questions about interpreting the goals from a couple of readers, so I want to make sure those are all clear for you. There's the overall larger target goal, smaller goals, relationships, that's key players in achieving that goal. Impact, things that have a low impact aren't going to have a significant effect on reaching our overall targets for these elements. Higher impacts, obviously, higher impact. And then the cost is just a low, medium, high. There are no numbers associated with it, especially since this is a longer term planning document. You don't want to try to be adjusting for inflation from 8 years ago when this plan was written. So they're just ballpark estimates. By looking at low cost, high impact goals, we can identify some of the quick wins, which will have the biggest impact for the least amount of money, especially if like this one, they're on a shorter timeline, those are identified as quick wins. And then priority here, again, prioritizing those quicker wins, things that will have the most impact. There are some additional goals. Again, I won't read all of these. Oh, one thing to note, I noticed this as I was putting this together, TMAC is not listed in any of the partnerships, which seems a little odd to me. They should probably be in all of these for mobility. So we'll make sure we go in and add those. One thing that TMAC can help with as we're bringing this forward, these are general goals that don't align with any elements specifically of the plan or any of the key performance indicators or targets, but this creating accountability and ownership and building this into future city policies. So these are goals and targets that TMAC can keep in mind moving forward, hopefully is the purpose of the document, so that as you're evaluating new proposals or considering new policies, developing new ideas, you can try to keep some of these goals, these larger citywide goals in mind, and make sure we're working toward those, even use them as a checklist if it helps you create an easier way for evaluating some of the plans. This is definitely interdepartmental. It's going to take everybody. There's no one person or one department that's going to ensure our stability for our future. It's absolutely collaborative, and TMAC, I think, has a huge role to play. If you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, I'd love to hear them.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
First off, I apologize for joining late and missing some of your initial presentation. When I was reading the plan or the draft conservation plan document that we were sent ahead of time, I was paying attention to the use of VMT as the key performance indicator. It says on page 26, where you're talking about VMT per day per capita. You suggest substituting, maybe I misunderstand the text here, but there's a suggestion of substituting trips per person per day instead of VMT.
Yeah.
So I see this on page 26 there. Yeah.
In here, I can try.
Yeah, right there on the bottom left.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, trips per capita.
So one of the things we've seen in a lot of dense areas with good pedestrian access and good transit connectivity is that the number of trips per day goes up, because it's easy to make trips, and so it's really easy to walk down the street and go to a restaurant and then to a shop and then to another thing instead of driving to a suburban supercenter of some kind. And so I guess I was curious if you had any additional thoughts on this, and I just wonder if trips per day is not a good measure potentially.
We happen to agree, which is why we ended up going with vehicle miles traveled.
Okay.
Had some difficulty gathering the data for vehicle miles traveled, as I mentioned. So this was identified simply as if vehicle miles traveled turns out to be inadequate, we can't find that data. This is a close second that could work, but wasn't our primary target for exactly the reasons you just said. Yeah.
Okay.
And Greg, I'll add on to that, because that came as a suggestion from engineering, and the reason is, so those are vehicle
trips. Okay.
And the reason why we suggested that is because the vehicle miles traveled, we don't have a good measuring stick, I guess, to be able to do that. And so the only thing that we have, and where the 16 comes from, which is rather low if you compare that to a nationwide average, and the reason why that is it comes from regional modeling that only includes arterials and collectors. It doesn't include the entire local street system, and so it's an imperfect, I guess, indicator, especially if you try to compare it to like I said, to any kind of averages. And so we suggested that we use trips, especially because there's a lot of trips. I can't remember the exact percentages. There's a very large percentage of the trips in Provo or I guess, the vehicle miles traveled in Provo on the modeling that are on the highway system that neither begin nor end in Provo. And then an even larger, percentage where they may begin in Provo but end somewhere else, or begin somewhere else and end in Provo. And so trips generated from Provo, especially as we're talking about per capita, we suggested, or vehicle trips per capita was probably the best indicator that had to do with the population of Provo itself, is vehicle trips, starting from Provo.
Okay, so this would be vehicle trips produced by Provo residents? Is that
Vehicle trips originating in Provo, something like that.
Vehicle trips originating in Provo is how you, okay.
And
All right.
to that point, Rob, do we have a good way to measure vehicle trips per day?
So we've done a couple of things. I think that the best number that we can get, that I think is what this 4.9. I can talk about it more with Henna afterwards, but the best thing that we have is the measurements that are taken at any of the cameras or any of the signals that track counts, and then making assumptions based off of where those are at. The regional modeling makes assumptions of where those trips are generating from, and are able to track that. We can also calibrate calibrated based off of either Provo specific counts that we've done, or the ITE manual, to try to pinpoint based off of where we're seeing traffic, where it seems to be traveling to, where it is on our network system, making an estimate of where it is. And that's the best. I mean, with 120,000 residents, that's kind of the best that we can estimate it.
So it strikes me, sorry if you're going to say something else, Clancy. It strikes me that that's the same techniques you would use to estimate city VMT, right? You'd use traffic counters that are on the roads to get it, multiplied by the length of the road, and that's how you calculate VM. So it seems like we don't actually have a better way of getting trips than we do of getting VMT. We're either relying on a regional travel model, which has some issues in its design and implementation, or we're looking at traffic count data, basically. So I guess if traffic count data is where we're coming back to, then why don't we make that the performance measure? And I think there are good reasons not to, but I think it brings up the idea that maybe we need some other metric, or maybe we need to ask the region to do a rolling travel survey so we have more updated data on the travel behaviors of people in Provo. There are lots of things we could do instead, but I don't think that trips per day is a reasonable substitution.
Yeah, and there's no perfect solution, because when we look at survey data, especially when it's self-reported, it can often be heavily skewed towards certain biases. People often over-report their sustainable behavior and under-report their less sustainable behavior. We also would have to redo that survey with approximately the same parameters every time we wanted to update our vehicle miles traveled number, as we're comparing against those baselines for 2030 and 2050. So there are pros and cons to every measurement we looked at. It just seemed like this was the easiest for gathering consistent data, even if it wasn't maybe the most telling data. But if TMAC has preferences or solutions, you can see there are options, and we'd love your input on that.
Yeah, I think my key thought is what Greg is saying, that both VMT and trips are imperfect. And because of the trips comment Greg made at the beginning, and because VMT and trips are essentially measured the same way, I would strongly recommend we stick with VMT for now. That's my opinion.
Does anyone else have an opinion on this?
I had a question on the air quality. I may have misheard. I thought you said that the air quality had maybe you did say decrease, but it's actually, and maybe you, okay, so the air quality has improved every decade, right? The number has dropped, but the air quality has improved every decade since the 80s, right?
Yes. So the higher the number, the worse the air quality. So the number has dropped and the quality has improved. I just said it backwards, but yes.
Okay,
These
all right.
here show that they've been decreasing as we've become increasingly more efficient. Sorry, since the 1980s. I think I said the 60s as well.
Having lived here for a long time, the big difference is when Geneva shut down, we all noticed a huge difference in air quality, and that matches these decades, kind of.
Cars have also become increasingly efficient and putting out lower emissions.
Right.
Geneva moving, there are a lot of factors.
But our vehicle miles traveled has increased over that time period because our population has increased.
Yes, and this is sort of a per capita measurement. Our overall vehicle miles traveled will probably increase as population increases. But if we do it per capita, then we can kind of look at that ratio and get a better idea of how much each person's traveling. Yeah, that's per day per capita.
Hannah, I had one other question on the list of changes that you sent out. I didn't take the time to check all of these at all. Just in the summary, they all generally made sense to me. The second bullet though says removed uses of the word equity throughout. I'm curious what the driver or intent of that was.
That was direction we received from city leadership. It was thought to be polarizing in a document that didn't need to be as polarizing as the word equity was. It was distracting.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I guess we're mobility, so we'll move on from that.
Yeah. It came from our higher ups. That was the direction we received.
Okay. Cool. Well, I appreciate the presentation, Hannah, and we had some good comments there. Is there? I want to make sure we have time for the other items on our agenda, though. Is there additional comment or action needed from us at this time, or?
Well, there's other things that come up in our meetings with the public. Some of the strategies that were listed is try to discourage, the way I read it is trying to discourage parking for people when they come and visit the city by, increasing, we've been moving towards unpaid or paid parking, but we have a lot of paid parking. We have a lot of unpaid parking. Well, I don't think we charge for any of the parking in downtown currently. And the recommendation is to put in paid parking. I think our businesses would be very concerned about that. So there's long-term sustainability and desires on that side, but there's also the realities of the businesses of our people in downtown. We've listened to a lot of people over the number of years that would not agree with those strategies because it would hurt the businesses downtown. So how are we going to? So as I read this, it's a sustainability report that these are the goals, but it's at odds with other things that we need in the city that I've heard from people that have come to TMAC. So
that seems like
what is the city going to do to, at TMAC, we are not politicians. We're not political. We're focusing on transportation and mobility. So is the city asking us for feedback on what impact the sustainability thing will have on mobility and what we've heard from residents and businesses? Or is this something we're being asked to just integrate? I'm having a hard time figuring out how to do the trade-offs.
We welcome your feedback. Those trade-offs are absolutely important. There have been a lot of trends towards paid parking. We do currently charge for some parking downtown already. It seems like this might be part of a larger conversation about paid parking and the cost of parking in general that we don't have time for today. I want to respect the agenda.
Well, I use that as an example. There's sustainability, but it's in tension with other things of livability in the city, right? So I'm wondering, what are we being asked to do with this? Are we being asked to say this is how it's going to affect mobility? What is the ask here from TMAC?
You are experts in the field of transportation, and transportation is a huge element of this. If you have feedback before this goes to the Planning Commission, we'd love to hear your recommendations. The Planning Commission will then make their recommendation to council, who will ultimately vote to accept it. So you're not being asked to vote on it or anything, but if you have expert input, we'd love to hear it, especially at this phase. And that includes weighing trade-offs like you were talking about.
Because I don't see the the trade-offs are not showing up in the document. The trade-offs are one side is sustainability. I don't see the analysis of what it does to the other people's mobility. What impact if we implemented these with current technology, mobility is going to decrease. There's no question in my mind. The technology in the cars, technology is going to have to change to enable these. So I don't see any of those trade-offs in the document, right? I know the reality of what we can do transportation today and mobility, and these are sustainability goals, which I get, but I don't see the trade-offs in all of the sections. I mean, they're great aspirational goals. I like having good air quality and all those things. I'm just struggling with the practical doing it.
And if I could add to that as well, my comment was similar to David's. I really enjoyed reading this document and hearing the ideas, and I was really impressed with it. But I noticed, let's see, on page 3, and this is more of a philosophical, less specific version of what David's talking about here, but on page 3, it talks about the triple bottom line for a city. And I thought, if we can go there. Where it talks about, I'm trying to remember the 3 things.
Sustainability, environment, and economy.
Yes, thank you. Those 3 things. And I feel like, and understandably, later, I think it's on page 5, it talks about how the committee chose to leave economic resiliency to the general plan, which makes sense, rather than addressing that in the sustainability plan. But I agree that some of the recommendations that were made will decrease traditional modes like cars, or make it harder to go to businesses by making it paid parking. And maybe, I saw Greg's comment that maybe actually paid parking helps increase business revenues, and we could talk about that. I'm not an economist, I'm not an expert on that, but I do agree that with Dave Arnold that these sustainability goals might be in conflict in some cases with economic goals, and I didn't see that addressed extensively in the plan. There was a conversation on Provo Forward recently where many people are expressing, I don't shop in Provo because it's too hard to get around. And some people said, well, I love biking and going to the small shops, and that's great, but a large portion of Provo shops in Orem or Springville or Spanish Fork because they feel like it's just too hard to get around. And so if we make those sustainable changes, which are admirable and maybe the best choice after all, I think there needs to be a conversation at some point about, well, how do those affect the economics of Provo before we just say, hey, these sound great, let's go forward with those. I haven't, like David said, I didn't see that philosophical tension addressed in the document, and maybe this isn't the place for it, but that was my main response. In addition to the many great details and the 8 facets of sustainability that were just stellar, I know that's going to be an issue that will come up and a criticism that will come up that I would appreciate hearing addressed a little bit more.
We might need to come back another time when there's...
Yes, not today.
Yeah, that would be great. And as far as like encouraging people shopping in Provo, we'd love that because it's easier for them to get around. They're reducing their vehicle miles traveled by having more direct, easy trips. They're putting more money into the economy. Like, these are absolutely goals of the sustainability plan, and we want to make sure they're well represented and well discussed. So we'll look at coming back another time. We'll talk about getting on the agenda.
If I may add just one additional thought. I recognize that this plan has its limitations that have been articulated in the document and are being identified here in our discussion. I won't use the word equity for the reasons that have been identified by you, Hannah, but there are what I'll call perhaps social dimensions to transportation that are not addressed here, such as access and safety that are just as important in the transportation context and also important in providing a sustainable, I'll call sustainable transportation planning for the future. So the document is great for what it does. There are certainly things that are missing that I think it could be added to it, and maybe we don't restructure from the 8 benchmark or the 8 KPIs that I think is what it's called. And perhaps we identify in the appendices additional things that need to be dealt with or considered as this plan is hopefully adopted and as it evolves over time. I see this plan as an initial step for us to get our feet on the ground and doing something that will be more sustainable for the community. And if we can add things such as that have what I'll call the social dimensions of safety, accessibility, those kinds of things that can be noted and thought to be perhaps added in the future as the plan evolves and develops over time.
I think that'd be great, and I'd love to talk more with you about some of the specific ideas you have and where we can put those. So I'll send. And on that note, if anyone else has any other thoughts, feel free to email me, Hannah Salzl, and also Melissa McNally, who's working on the plan as well. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for your comments. Let's go to item 4 now, Tempe Drive tactical urbanism proposal. So this was discussed quickly at the end of last meeting where they're going to be resurfacing Timpview Drive soon. And so there's been a proposal, I think, by a BikeWalk Provo to do some tactical urbanism to test different parking and bike lane and shoulder arrangements. So I believe today we'll be hearing or hopefully seeing some of those proposals. So I'll turn the time to Brian.
Thank you. So yes, an opportunity has come up to demonstrate some improvements. Timpview Drive is going to be refinished this summer. So before that happens, we would like to try some demonstration projects. And the city has been supportive of this. So today is a draft presentation of what we propose to do. We are looking for feedback on other possibilities, things maybe we haven't thought of that we'd like to demonstrate. But today we're going to go over kind of some of the ideas that we've had that we'd like to do before this refinish happens. So the current condition on Timpview Drive, it's a straight and wide street. There's not a lot of difference in the profile of the street for the entire almost 2-mile length. Lots of on-street parking. There are bike lanes and car lane in each direction. Pretty standard street.
Is there a visual is there a visual we should be seeing right now?
Oh, yep. You're not seeing it?
Sorry.
No.
I forgot to hit the.
So if you could just restate those last couple of sentences with the visual, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for pointing that out. There you go. All right. Okay, so yeah, this is just the introduction that this is going to be a safety demonstration project of different multimodal treatments we can do. We are doing this on Timpview Drive, but we are looking at the wider city. So we'd like to demonstrate things. Slate Canyon Drive has come up as a potential for some of these implementations, other cities around town. But yeah, we just want to demonstrate on this road what those look like, give the public a chance to give feedback on what those are. Yeah, current condition, again, it's a straight and wide street, does have on-street parking, bike lanes, and 2 car lanes in each direction. One thing, if you look at the image to the left here,
Brian, is that, you said 2 car lanes in each direction, is that correct?
sorry, 2 car lanes, 1 in each direction.
Okay, thank you.
But if you look at this left picture, you can kind of see there in the distance the sidewalk and the bike lane. There technically isn't room for parking and a bike lane there. The parking lane is actually only about 6 feet wide. So there's some treatments we want to do. Some of the inconsistencies on Timpview we'd like to address, and we'll get into that here in a minute. In a nutshell, there are services that are provided that are severely underutilized, while there are other active uses that are not really well supported. And just to go through some of those, the on-street parking is, in some areas, it's almost never used because the homes face other streets. The street becomes very wide in that context, and so cars go flying down this road. 35 is not uncommon. I did get in a car with a gentleman who lived his life at 100 miles an hour, and we got in the car, got on Tempe Drive, and he hit the hammer down, and he was doing 56 when I told him he needed to slow down. So it's a wide street, but people just fly down. Some of the intersections have really broad curb return radii, and this encourages people to take corners very quickly. Now, in the spring and the summertime, hundreds of people are out jogging, biking, walking, pushing strollers. It's a gym almost in the mornings in the summertime. There's also lots of kids walking, riding, and scooting to school. 4 different schools along this road are accessed from Timpview Drive. Lots of kids.
Are the kids in the road?
Sometimes, yes.
Have
Riding
we-
bikes to school will be in the road.
Have we had any, what is the accident rate on this road for those, has there been any accidents?
I'm about to get there.
Okay, I'll be patient and wait.
Okay, no problem. On Timpview Drive, I couldn't find any data in the quick amount of time I had to look at it of bicycle pedestrian incidents. There was a pretty significant bicycle incident just off Timpview Drive in front of Centennial. That has been remediated, but a lot of close calls. I'm a cyclist. I've had a close call with somebody pulling out of a side street without stopping and without looking, nearly hit me. So there's kind of 2 Timpview Drives. There's the southern portion where it starts to Timpview, which is Quail Valley Drive. 5,500 cars a day use that section. North of Timpview, there's only 820 cars per day, which is actually where I feel that most of the speeding also occurs, just in my anecdotal experience. No fatalities in the last 5 years that we could find. There have been 24 collisions in that high traffic section and only 8 collisions on the low traffic section. One was serious. Most of them are just fender benders. So in actuality, it's a fairly safe street. But given how many children use this street, as well as the people exercising and riding, we want to look at some ways we can improve this street while also demonstrating for the rest of the city.
If I could just, sorry,
Yep.
I just wanted to add anecdotally, my son spent all of last year biking to Timpview along Timpview Drive. And there was quite a bit of home building and remodeling and construction, and he's a savvy biker and he was used to biking all the time, and he felt pretty uncomfortable. There were a lot of close calls where he would come home and say, well, Mom, I almost died today. And he's not prone to exaggerate. So I know bike safety for those students is an issue, just by way of personal experience.
And it surprises me, I live about 2 blocks from Edgemont, and it surprises me how many of my neighbors still drive their kids to Edgemont, leaving just 2 blocks away. I asked one of them, and she said she just doesn't feel that it's safe to ride there. as well as the crossing guard there at the Timpview Edgemont intersection. The woman is an absolute saint. She has dealt with people who will blow through after she gets the kids to the other half of the crosswalk. People will blow through the intersection. There are just some really dangerous things on the street. So we wanted to set some specific goals, definitely to improve safety for the kids walking, riding, and scooting. We also want to demonstrate how to make any street safer for runners, joggers, cyclists, and anyone else using it for exercise. How can we reduce the design speed so that motorists naturally drive slower, as well as make it quieter, safer? We met one of my neighbors as we were kind of doing an inventory of the street, and he mentioned the noise, that it's very loud, that he and his wife go out walking, and it's hard for them to have a conversation because of the noise. After he had mentioned that, on my walk back to my house, I noticed some cars driving past felt like they were going more or less the speed limit, and it was quieter, while other cars that were really flying down the road, there was a lot more noise. So how can we make it quieter? As well as heat island effect, the heat on the asphalt, there aren't a lot of trees. There's really no planter strips that you could put trees in. Is there any ways we can make it more comfortable to run, where there's more shade, as well as reduce that heat island effect? We came up with 6 potential principles. I'm going to go through each one of these individually real quick. The first one is roundabouts. There are 3 stop signs currently on Timpview Drive. They get ran all the time, and not always maliciously. I was driving with a friend, he just didn't see it. The design of the intersections don't feel like there's any change in the road, and so the stop signs get run a lot. We felt a roundabout, we want to demonstrate it at 2950 north, because that's within the refinish zone. But the suggested information, there's kind of 3 places, one at the north end, one at the south end, and then at Quail Valley between Timpview and Edgemont. Those are the busiest intersections along Timpview that could benefit from a roundabout. Especially in front of Timpview, the high school students will back all the way to Canyon Road because of the 4-way stop, and it just becomes a really busy intersection at class change.
Can I ask about, sorry, Rob, can I ask about these roundabouts? So in order to work as traffic calming, roundabouts kind of have to divert the traffic a little bit out of the way. How are you going to be able to do that in a temporary installation where you're not moving the sidewalk at all or doing additional construction? Is my question unclear?
Sorry, you're asking me as opposed to Brian.
I guess anyone. Sorry, I can't tell who's talking.
So we've talked about a couple of uses for it. So we'll see what materials I guess make sense for the most. We wanted to get y'all's feedback, and then we'll dive into the particulars. But we have temporary curbing that we bought for some smaller traffic circle demonstrations on 1450 East. So we have those, and they're not as, we need to think of ways to make it pretty, so it's not just this, if this is what we need to resort to, but we've also got traffic panels that we can use to neck things down, and then have the traffic circle to where they're diverted.
So Rob, I saw that in the notes next week. I don't know what a traffic panel is. Can you tell me what that is?
Just the temporary, when there's construction out on the roadway, it's the not cones, it's the flatter that they use to divert traffic. So we can use those to
oh, okay, got it.
down and then move them around.
We would use a number of materials, and the idea is we want to kind of get your feedback, how you feel about it, and we think that the engineering can be taken care of. We would sit down and design these things up so they'd be safe and comfortable, but we want people we want kind of your input on putting these in for, these will only be in for a couple months, maybe 2 or 3 months. Go out and do speed studies, get feedback from the public. Had a neighborhood meeting up on Canyon Road, and we told that neighborhood about this demonstration taking place down in Timpview. They were very excited. They wanted to come down and see this. We're hearing this from all over the city. They want to investigate ideas to bring out the points that, what can we do to make these neighborhoods more comfortable, more inviting, more interesting, other modes of traffic. So I think from the engineering standpoint, we're going to be able to solve those issues. What we'd like you to kind of weigh in on are these the kind of things you think you'd like to see to show the public?
Okay, thank you.
And the original idea when we got started is we wanted to demonstrate this at that Quail Valley intersection. Because of the construction at Timpview, that asphalt is not being replaced this year, as well as just the construction. There's enough going on there. We felt that may not be the best year to do that, which is why we picked this intersection at 2950 North. It's another fairly busy intersection. We'll demonstrate it there, but we'd prefer it implemented in another place. So, any other questions at the moment? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Parking buffered mobility lanes. There are some places on Timpview Drive where the parking is a bit excessive, and we thought about testing a flip of the bike lane with the parking. This pushes the cars closer to the road, which helps make the road feel narrower when they do park on the road. But it also puts the kids riding their bikes over against the sidewalk. There's a good buffer. The kids aren't going to get taken out by someone texting and fading into the bike lane. There's a lot of blocks on Timpview as well that the homes face side streets and only their side yards face the street. We felt to push the parking lanes over against the curb in those areas. You don't have a lot of driveways to interrupt. It becomes a very clean bike lane that very likely will be used by runners as well and many others. But to just flip those two in connection with some other ideas we have. So the demonstration.
Let me to make sure there's not room to do that on both sides of the road, right? Because the parking isn't wide enough.
In some parts of Timpview, yes. Other parts, no. What we'd like to do in this particular area here, shown in the picture on the right, there is room to do the parking protected on one side of the road. Across the street is that image where the parking lane's only 6 feet. We want to demonstrate a landscape buffered bike lane on that side of the street.
Okay.
To just show what that would also look like. And I'll show a map here in a minute that kind of shows that.
The intent isn't that we do this treatment the entire stretch. We would do these in sections that would make sense, that we have the width. Because again, these are demonstrations that would implement throughout the city. So this isn't a final design. This is a come and check this out through this section. How did you feel driving your bike through this section versus this section? How did you feel about parking? How did you feel about driving? What did the speeds do? What happened? So it's kind of an opportunity to do some different treatments throughout the whole section, and then come back and study that whole section while these treatments are in and see what took place. And we want to find out. We don't know yet how the public's going to respond. So this is a good opportunity to get some honest feedback.
And the main idea here is to test, will these lanes work for a couple of months? Can we test them around people's driveways? Is there conflict? Is that greater than the bikes being out next to the fast-moving traffic? Can we just test this for a couple of months to see maybe we need to stay further from the driveways? It's a test project, just to see what happens and see if it is beneficial or if it's just different, or maybe it could be worse. Being just a temporary installation, we can determine those metrics. So in conjunction with flipping these bike lanes, we'd like to try what's called a Dutch-style intersection. This kind of creates a bike crosswalk next to the pedestrian crosswalk that protects the bikes at certain lanes. Now we've gone back and forth in discussions whether this is necessary on Timpview Drive. We'd like to demonstrate it for potentially other intersections in the city. There is one in Salt Lake on, I believe, 2nd East and 2nd South. Don't quote me on that. But they put one up there that is working phenomenally. We want to demonstrate one, and that would be at this intersection, 2780 North. This road heads east into Indian Hills and is also one of the busiest intersections in the area, but to demonstrate a Dutch-style intersection that we could maybe implement in other parts of the city.
So would you do that with paint, or how would you do that?
Yeah, it would mainly be paint.
Okay.
As well as in conjunction with those flip bike lanes, that's where these really work the best.
Mm-hmm.
That way it keeps the center of the street for automobiles, the edge of the street is cyclists, and then the sidewalks are pedestrian spaces.
Brian, is that an intersection that is a four-way stop or just a two-way stop?
The intersection we're demonstrating is a two-way stop. It is a four-way treatment. That's something we also need to discuss. Can we put up a temporary to demonstrate that?
I just wanted to add.
So it would temporarily need to become a four-way stop in order to demonstrate it, is what you're saying?
It would, yes. The trouble we ran into is the number of intersections we have to demonstrate is limited. We only have one four-way stop. So we wanted to show that, and that's why we picked this intersection.
I just wanted to make one more point. Another element of the design of this intersection is it shortens the turning radius, forcing cars to slow down as they make turns, which I think is an important consideration.
Right.
Yes, and that is something that the curb return radii along Timpview Drive range from my street. It's like a 2-foot radius. Others are like 20 feet. And so we do want to demonstrate those fixed so the cars do turn slower, which is actually the next one, to do some bulb outs, but also demonstrate bicycle-friendly bulb outs. Sometimes the bulb outs can force cycles into the travel lanes. We want to narrow the road, but not narrow too much, or possibly in this Dutch style, make the bulb outs where the cyclist can ride behind them. There are currently 2 bulb outs on Timpview Drive. You can see it there in that picture. We actually wanted to demonstrate the Dutch style here, but these bulb outs actually make it difficult because the bikes would have to go up over the bulb out, which is why we're demonstrating it on the next one. But there's several streets that we want to demonstrate the bulb outs that do create that radius that slows cars down, which also triggers to the mind as you're driving that there's an intersection. It's a conflict point, so it necks it down, that slows people down at the conflict point. And then the last thing, we're not 100% sure how we're going to demonstrate this yet, but this was discovered down in Santa Clara, down near St. George. They wanted to slow down traffic. They built these traffic islands and put plants in them. We want to demonstrate 2 ways, with a traditional bike lane like this is showing, but also would this work with the parking protected bike lanes to help beautify, create some shade, but also slow cars down. Now, when I discovered this, I was with another gentleman who was driving who actually was lost. We got lost looking for a youth group. And as we came down this road, I was so enamored by how cool this was, because this is something I'd always wondered if you could do, and here it was. As we came through this, I let the guy keep driving, even though I knew we were lost. And I looked over and noticed he was doing 32 miles an hour. It's a 35-mile-an-hour street. This only goes for about a mile, and then it goes back to a typical road. As we left this section, he bumped it up to about 45. I told him we had gone the wrong way. He turned around. He drove 45 back till he hit this spot, and he dropped back down to 32 again. As we were coming out of it, I pointed out to him, "Do you see how fast you're driving?" And he looked down, and he's like, "Oh," and then he immediately hit the accelerator. He didn't even know he had slowed down. So speed is probably one of the biggest things people complain about with Timpview Drive. And we feel like this implementation would help slow the cars. We've also thought Slate Canyon Drive, this would be a fantastic intervention there. It keeps the on-street parking for those that need it. But as we've seen on Timpview Drive, it's not heavily utilized. Around Timpview, it is a little more, but we would take that into account if this was ever implemented permanently. But we do want to demonstrate this as part of the project.
Okay, so I understand putting two in the parking buffered bike area. Putting it in the traditional bike lane area, how does that work?
As shown here in this picture, those are actually bike lanes. They're really small bike lanes in this picture, but they would basically just take one car space of parking.
Okay.
There's about one per house, give or take.
Oh, so you want to try one where it's where the configuration of the road's like this, and then another where you put it out into the buffered area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Got it.
And then the last thing is getting some crosswalk art to make the crosswalks more visible, especially near the schools, just to demonstrate how you can make those crosswalks kind of pop. As I was doing this, there was one street that had a crosswalk I'd never even noticed before because it's a T intersection. I'd never noticed there was a crosswalk there before. So to do some crosswalk art, we thought about possibly getting with the schools and having the kids do maybe an art contest related to the schools. Maybe they paint their mascot in the crosswalk. There's some technicalities we're still working through with laws concerning crosswalks and other things, but this is something we're also still running down. So this is more or less a map showing where we suggest to do these treatments. On the top picture on the right is 2200 North, which is basically the start of Timpview Drive. It does continue across, but only for a couple hundred feet. To do the parking protected bike lanes on the east side, as shown there, and then the landscape buffer to the south, or to the west, in front of a church. And then in the lower picture, which is heading north, where we do the Dutch style, where we can show bulb outs, and then the roundabout. And then the landscape buffer islands, we would find some places within these where they would kind of blend with these different treatments. We are open to suggestions for other interventions that maybe we haven't thought of, as well as your feedback on what you feel would best make this a success. And like I did say in the beginning, we're hoping this is a demonstration for interventions we can make across the city. We want to test and demonstrate some things and hopefully involve the entire city and at least driving through and seeing what these are like and get their feedback. So I'll turn it back to you for questions.
I have a question for Brian or a suggestion.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about this because these are all interventions that I think would work well in other parts of the city. But the one suggestion I had was about the painted crosswalks. I think if you decide to try that, I would keep them consistent, because if you turn it into a mural, you know, kind of every school gets to have its own design, that they'll become less of a crosswalk and more of an artwork. And I think we want it to be like a Provo logo or something like that, where people know this is a crosswalk. That would just be my concern, is that it would be more of a novelty and less of a warning sign.
Right, and that is one of the things we are working through, is they need to read as a crosswalk.
Yeah.
How can we bring a little more flare to them so they're noticed while still identifying as a crosswalk. So no, I appreciate that feedback.
Because if it works on Timpview, you want to be able to just carry it forward with the same design everywhere you go. And so if you have the ones on Timpview be consistent, something that would work citywide, then people have already interpreted that to mean crosswalk, and it would translate, I think, more directly in another application.
Right. And one thought was in downtown, they did the brick ones. Maybe we just go with bricks, and it's just painted bricks, and it's not quite so artistic.
Yeah. Or just, I was even just thinking like the welcome home logo for Provo is very simple. Like that picture that you showed with the leaves in it, something like that, that's just a repeating pattern, but still can have the cross hatches of the crosswalk through it so that it looks like a crosswalk.
Right. And one thing I didn't know this, I just learned this on Facebook a few months ago, that crosswalks have different, they read differently. This one that has the big blocky cross hatches actually legally means something different than just a crosswalk with two lines indicating the space. That's the question we have. Can we do anything because of the legal indicator that this is?
Right.
Yeah, I was going to add, there's been a lot of discussion about crosswalk design in the public comment of the most recent MUTCD, which has not yet been adopted yet, but it's likely that the MUTCD, when it comes out probably next year, will have a lot more guidance on what you can, what you must, and what you shouldn't do with crosswalk design. So I guess in this tactical urbanism, I think it would be good to experiment with some things, but it's very likely that FHWA will tell you what your crosswalks need to look like starting next year. So maybe not pay as much attention to that as some of the other things is kind of my thought.
Some of the things we've seen, I think, you're right about the crosswalks and design, but the MUTCD has come out a few years back with treatments leading up to a crosswalk. They'll have wiggly lines or do different things. So they have opened up a little bit, and we would make sure that we're following whatever. Nobody goes to jail. We're going to follow the laws. We set the bar real high. Nobody goes to jail. That's where we're going.
I know in one example I found online, they had a crosswalk that was one of these, but they painted it like it was a rope bridge with platforms. So you still had the blocks, but it was a tad more artistic. I don't know how much we could push it, but yeah, just somehow to make these crosswalks a little more visible, as well as to involve the neighborhood. That was kind of the idea here, was how can we involve the neighborhood in making their mark and making something unique for them. Again, not sure if this is even going to happen once we get down to all the legality of it, but this is one of the options we're suggesting.
I guess I wonder if there is another opportunity to involve neighborhood street art in this that doesn't, involve altering, traffic markings of some kind. It's something to think about.
Right, which we are planning on using some artwork for like bulb outs, as well as the roundabouts. They're going to be really colorful and really bright since they are temporary, just to get people accustomed to seeing them. So there will be that aspect. We wondered though, could we do this long term with crosswalks? May happen, may not.
That crosswalk with the leaves sure is lovely though. I would be a sucker for anything with a nature theme. We could turn cross hatches into tree trunks, or we could do diagonal lines into mountains. Maybe we could work it out. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Could you go back to the map? I had a comment. Yeah, I really, as someone who's spent a lot of time on Timpview Drive in a variety of modes of travel, I'm really excited about these ideas. One question I had on this lower picture, you have the Dutch style intersection and then two bulb outs and then a roundabout, all really close together, right on top of each other. I'm wondering if that's a little overkill to have those so very close together. What was your thought on those, on the spacing of those?
Yeah, the spacing was really it's all the intersection we have. There is, let's see, 25, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, so we're doing these in areas, we're working with BikeWalk, they approached us and our, overlay project, this summer is from the south end of Timpview up to, 3230, just before that intersection. And so that's the space, if we want to test, these things out, that's the space that we've got to work with, because that's what we can demonstrate up to the point that we tear it all out and overlay.
So we don't necessarily have to do all these things, but it makes sense to do as many as we can, to give people, but again, you put them on, I think your comments well taken. If you put them on top of each other, you really don't know which one's working and which ones are not. But I think, kind of want to get feedback, which ones you like, you don't like, which, if this is good, then we would sit down and we would start designing some stuff up that would be specific. And if we see things that are overlapping or too close, we're going to keep things safe. What we want to do is make the quality of life for people living in those neighborhoods that they want to enjoy being outside. They want to engage the environment they live in. And so it's not necessarily safety driven, because we have a lot of safe roads and we watch actions closely to understand what we're doing if we're causing things. But we want people to be happy with where they're at and what the city's doing, because we do get a lot of complaints about speeding, about other things, and you just can't put up the speed sign. That's not going to affect people. You have to do things that engage the environment, both for the driver and the pedestrians and the bike riders. So we've gone many years not doing that. So I think this is an opportunity to start reinventing how we roads and transportation. This is temporary. It's foul. People hate something, rid of it and act like we never did it. But if they like it, then we can try it elsewhere and keep doing these things. So.
Well, sure. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, to your comment on that, we originally wanted to do the Dutch style intersection back where the painted crosswalks are. Unfortunately, the bulb outs that already exist there make that impossible. And so we pulled it up here to 2780. Now, they do look pretty close together on this map. The two bulb outs in the middle, that's a pretty light touch intervention. Between the Dutch style and the roundabout is that a little over a quarter mile. They're not as close as they seem on this map. They're actually close enough. As I got looking at this, I thought it'd be nice where people can get out and walk and look at them. And they're close enough that can be done. But unfortunately, we ran out of intersections. But having walked it and driven it, we feel like they're far enough apart that they're not going to conflict too much with each other.
Okay, well, I'm happy to say let's give it a try. I think the goals to reduce speed and to beautify and to increase safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, those are all great. Just a thought that you don't want to completely kill flow on this road. However, because it does, Timpview is a school that half of Provo goes to, and there is a lot of need, 5,500 cars a day on that half of the street that are getting there. And maybe that'll go down if people feel safer to bike or walk, but you don't want to completely kill the flow on that road either.
Right. No, and I agree. I've been very nervous letting my children go to Days Market. I would rather than just get on their bikes and go buy a treat. My son actually had a close call on Canyon Road, so I won't let him ride on Canyon Road except for he's got to get as close as he can on Timpview and then drop down to Canyon Road. For me as well, I think we would see a lot more people cycling, riding, than it. My land planning hero is Jaime Lerner, and one of his principles about buses, but I believe it applies to everything else, it has to be just as convenient and feel just as natural as getting in your car, or people won't use it. They'll keep going to their car. So my intent with this is to demonstrate how can we make cycling feel convenient and easy and safe so people naturally make that choice without the fear and without the nervousness.
So I guess just kind of, what's the commission's sense? Are these things you'd like to see us go ahead and get some design going, and we can have these ready in the next 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, and we can take a look at them and get them implemented? Is that kind of the direction I'm hearing?
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. I like what you guys have done here. Appreciate the thought and effort, and I think it'd be great to get these done.
So how I envision this a little bit is the city is kind of over government. And so we're going to draw these lines, and there'll be nice lines where we will put those little bulb outs and stuff, but they're not going to be artistic. That's where BikeWalk, the neighborhood, can come in and put some things. Maybe it shows that there would be a tree here or a plant or some things that would give people an opportunity to have a vision of what those would look like. So the creative part won't be the city. We're going to do the engineering, place the things in a way that is meets all the code and the requirements, and then we will allow these places that the public can come in and do, I don't want to say art, but it's probably art, make some things that, like I said, full of flavor of what the actual thing might look like.
I like this too. I'm in favor. I like the the engineering trials and everything, but the other thing I like is the interaction with the public. We oftentimes get neighbors against neighbors, it's parking versus safety on roads, and I'm hoping that this will allow this particular neighborhood to maybe come together more and not be so divided over, their preferences. So I'm as interested in the public outcome as I am in the traffic outcome, to see if this is a way that we can get communities to agree on what they want on their streets. So I'm very excited to see how this goes.
Couple questions.
Yeah.
And I'm new to the committee.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my bearings here. After your presentation, you kept referring to we. I don't know we, or if you're speaking in terms of the planning commission making this recommendation, or is it just?
No, it's BikeWalk Provo. I'm not here as a planning commission member. I'm here as a citizen.
Okay.
This is something I think Rob and I talked 3 or 4 years ago about doing something like this, and he asked me to wait until they were going to refinish the road. And so, yeah, this is something, it's been a personal thing for me as a citizen that I've wanted to demonstrate some of this stuff. BikeWalk was kind of the avenue that's giving me the support to make this happen. They're doing a lot of work for this.
Second question, very stimulating ideas.
Yeah.
Neighborhood as well. It'd be interesting. There's a current need based on study. An estimation that they will come.
A little bit of both. I mean, I'm sure you've driven it and seen how many people are running and biking and using the road now in its current condition. In a way to support those people, there is a lot, like I said before, if it's convenient and feels safe, people will use it more. There are studies all over the country that prove that to be true. And bike lanes, Salt Lake City actually won an award for the most bike lanes per capita, or bike lane miles per capita. And in the same sentence, they were also condemned because they were the most dangerous kind of bike lane. And so their numbers were not up. But in Salt Lake, where they have the parking buffered bike lanes, they actually saw significant increases in people. So making it convenient, my daughter wanted to ride the Centennial, but I live down past Timpview, and I didn't feel comfortable with her riding that distance with the bike lanes the way they are. She wanted to. I told her no, and then the pandemic hit, and she never went to Centennial. But to just create that safety is what we're trying to look at here, so that people feel comfortable. I believe we will see an increase in people.
Fair question, but as a general matter, experience and studies show that
I can't hear Bill when you're talking. Can others hear Bill? I can't.
No, Bill, you got to get closer to the microphone.
Closest one.
Sorry.
David.
Is that a microphone or are these?
There's microphones up there.
Sorry.
No, my question was just, I'm curious about the general compatibility of bikers and joggers in the same lane, what the studies show.
I actually just came across some conflict with that, recently. They kind of work. There is some conflict. That's a question because they are already using them on Timpview. I've encountered people walking in the bike lane while I'm riding. There's a little bit of conflict. You call ahead, they usually move out of the way. It's not terrible. It's like the Provo Parkway Trail. Sometimes there will be people walking in the bike section of that road. You just call ahead that you're coming and they usually move out of the way. Sometimes there's a little bit of conflict, but it's never deadly like cars and bikes would be. Mm-hmm. And, swerving out of the bike lane to miss somebody and getting hit by a car. By flipping those bike lanes, we minimize the chance for life-changing accidents. So there is some question about people turning into driveways. What if a cyclist is riding behind a car and somebody turns? In some neighborhoods, that can be an issue, but where Timpview, where there's so few people parking on the street, create a buffer zone between the driveway and the parking with stripes or other means. It's really not, it's no different than someone backing out of their driveway and not seeing a cyclist in the lanes as they are now, which is actually a more dangerous situation because backing up, you have far less visibility. So, but again, it's slow maneuvers that likely won't create life-changing conflict if they meet each other.
Rob, are you putting speed sensors in the entire trial so that we can see if the speed drops?
Yeah, so we'll put up. We talked about putting up both our traffic counters that do speed, vehicular speed, before, during, and after the trial, and then we've also got speed guns to where we can check speeds going through particular intersections where it's harder to pick up, with the counters. And then the other thing that we have are just some cameras that we can stick out there and see counts, I guess, and maybe visuals of how things are going on with pedestrians, joggers, and cyclists on the road.
So you're going to have counts for pedestrian, bikes, and cars before, during, and after?
Yeah. So for the pedestrians and the bikes, we're probably like for the counters, for the vehicular counters, we can put those up and they'll do continuous counts. For the video that we need to do for bicycles and pedestrians are just going to be 24-hour counts, a day count, and a day count after. So.
And I think the feedback that's going to be most important is the public saying, I like this, I don't like this, I'd like this in my neighborhood, not. So I think those counts, we'll watch to see if we're diverting traffic to other streets, but I think at the end of the day, this is a real golden opportunity to get public feedback. It's hard to describe these things until you experience them. And so we can't tell everybody drive down to Salt Lake or drive to some other city. I think it's really important to do it here in Provo. And they can all come here and get an opinion.
The other thing too that I'll say about this, so BikeWalk, Brian specifically, BikeWalk did approach us and doing this, and some of these are, specific to the bicycle lanes, but a lot of these are just traffic calming measures overall. Whether or not there were bike lanes on Tempe Drive, they'd have, their common traffic calming features.
I guess one last comment. All these interventions are happening outside of the automotive lanes. We're not making any changes other than the intersection roundabout. The traffic lanes themselves aren't changing. So other than helping slow the cars because of design speed, kind of your intuitive feel of what's safe behind the wheel, the drive lanes aren't changing. It's mainly just the perimeters as to help those that are using the road but don't really have the facility to use it as safe as they could.
So do you see this as a basic wash with the inherent hazards of, the parked car that the guy gets out and opens his front door and the bike runs into it?
Mm-hmm.
Right turns into a bike lane. Do you see this making any difference in those two calculations?
On the first one, the door opening, there's always a driver, but there's not always a passenger. By flipping the two, you actually reduce how many doors are going to be opening next to the bike lane. The driver always gets in and out. At intersections, you do need to create some buffer so there's visibility, so you don't have cars parking right on the corners, which my neighbor does all the time. He parks right flush with the corner. It's so hard to get off our street. I've been tempted to go out in the middle of the night and paint patches to keep him from parking so close to the corner. But at any rate, there is some studies. I don't have actual data with me today to present, but we can get together and talk about that.
And
Right.
Bill, it's not always intuitive that you narrow a road by putting parking on it and it makes things safer, but it does. As soon as you get that parking on the side, as a driver, you don't know what the parked vehicles are going to do. You slow down, and this road is way too wide. That's why people are speeding. And so they're doing a number of things here to narrow the feel of this road, and it should bring the traffic down, and that's always safer. So the main thing in flipping the parking with the bicycles, it's going to slow the cars down because it's moving parking over closer to the travel lanes. So it's not just, so for bikes, the doors open, it's what he said is true, but getting those bikes out closer to the travel lanes is going to slow the cars down, and that's going to reduce the number of accidents.
Good.
It's not always intuitive, all this stuff, but the things they're doing should improve the safety of this road a lot and not harm its efficiency.
David, I look forward to having you moderate my intuition. So, Timpview Drive is an arterial, right?
Yeah, Timpview is a collector.
Well, I mean, however we designate it, I mean, my point is it's intended to move traffic.
Right.
It is.
And so, granted, safety is the factor, right? I mean,
right.
Really. But to what extent do we diminish that collector arterial function by multiple roundabouts?
The roundabout actually keeps you moving.
Yeah.
So you don't have to stop if nobody's at the intersection. So I actually went to Carmel, Indiana this last summer, which is the roundabout capital of the U.S., specifically to study the roundabouts. And they claim something like their roundabouts save on average 20,000 gallons of fuel a year because you're not idling.
Yeah, that's great.
And I'm all for roundabouts. They fix so many metrics. The other big thing is T-bone collisions, which are the most dangerous and the most injury prone. You're not coming at each other perpendicularly.
You glance off
you
each
kind
other.
of glance off each other, yes, which still causes damage, but it protects the occupants.
And Provo has put in a lot of our, I say, trying to think of a full roundabout that's not on the collector. I think all the roundabouts that we have, I think, are on collector roads, and they are very efficient. There's one by my house, 920, and Freedom, and it carries, I think, between 920 and Freedom carries 14,000 cars per day is my recollection from the top of my head, and I've never seen a significant.
Yeah, it's a lot better than a four-way stop. I go through that intersection all the time too. It's a lot better than a four-way stop.
I've been hoping for roundabouts on Timpview Drive for years. Great.
I don't think there's anything they're doing here that should reduce the capacity of this road. Hopefully it'll just slow it down and make it safer.
Well, I appreciate that. Anecdotally, I've been a promoter for the past year and a half to get roundabouts on Slate Canyon. And I hope we can find the money for that here this next cycle. Much needed there. Much needed.
Well, and there's also been talk, Bill, on this map, 2200 north, because again, the traffic to Centennial at this intersection that's currently signaled, but then the intersection down below that kind of dives off of 2200 to do a roundabout there to cure the traffic woes, again, from class change. It's been
Very helpful.
to keep the traffic moving instead of being stuck there with a dangerous T-bone.
Would you be taking out that little thumb of cement on the right-hand turn into?
Yes. Yep.
That bedevils many drivers in that area. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at the lower photo there, you show the 4 traffic circles, or what we're gonna do with them.
Yeah.
That's just experimental to show
Yes.
varieties.
Yeah.
You wouldn't cluster roundabouts that closely together, would you, ultimately?
No.
That does seem like overkill.
Yeah, again, no, we wouldn't put one at every intersection for sure, just at the major intersections. And in the first part of the presentation, basically 2200 north beginning, we're suggesting it in front of Timpview and Edgemont, and then on Foothill Drive, one, to help the cars slow down coming down Foothill, but also to make that intersection a little safer, the north end of Timpview Drive. The third roundabout there, kind of in connection with the cemetery.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I know what you mean now.
Yeah, to do one there as well as what we're suggesting. Obviously, we haven't discussed in depth whether we even have, I mean, we clearly don't have the money to do any of this, but we want to demonstrate it so we can put it in the plans.
We've anticipated my last question. What's your price range for roundabouts?
Or roundabouts.
Roundabouts are probably a good round number is about $500,000 in terms of, because of, on existing streets, where we'd have to redo some of the drainage, we may have to move some utility manholes. We're tearing out existing and putting in new. A rough roundabout number is about $500,000.
Not cheap.
Not cheap.
How much is a signalized intersection?
How does that compare to the cost of resurfacing the road, just to put it, assuming that's where you would put it in?
Just resurfacing the road.
Yeah.
For that intersection, we're talking about probably thousands. We're in the low thousands of dollars just for an intersection, just milling and overlaying. We're doing, I don't remember how many miles of overlay for a total of $2 million, about $2 million.
So this would add a significant amount to what is already budgeted for that road.
Right. So this is to test out. We'd have to figure out funding afterwards to be able to put them in. Yeah, roundabouts are not, in terms of the full size roundabouts that the city does on collection roads like this. Rough number is about $500,000 clearing out and redoing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Brian and Rob, do you think, have we finished discussing this agenda item? Do you think any final comments or questions?
I appreciate the feedback.
Great, thank you so much for that presentation. Rob, question for you. We haven't gotten to the item for the Center Street, but we've lost a couple of our TMAC members. Is that something that's time sensitive that we need to get to today, or should we save that for next time?
No, just as a 30-second, just to let you know. So we were gonna bring back, I guess, the next steps and go through some of the scoring. I know I think with how I presented last time, I left the impression that we were, because of some of the things we were talking about, that we were ignoring the scoring, and we're not. So, but we can leave that to next time, and we can go through kind of your top ones and what our plans are of options. But just kind of as maybe a 30-second update, we are putting together, or we got a consultant on board to help us to put together just some quick rough numbers. We're going through the budgeting right now, and to come up with some broad options of a range of different things, from all the way from, if we just put in, I think the number one on yours and the number one for Downtown Provo Inc., and it sounded like there was a lot of support from the council, was the arch, and then one that was in your top 10 that was the other top one for the downtown Provo Inc. That seems to have a lot of support is putting in some more dining and parklet areas. So we went from just, if we do that, all the way up to, you know, the cost of if we were to basically redo all of Center Street from 5th West to 1st East. And I'm going to bring that forward just so we know what numbers we're talking about. As we continue to, we'd like to, you know, continue to move forward with our concept of kind of same here on Timpview. As we're talking about budget and trying to secure some funding that may be available now, we'd still like to, before we do a lot of hard changes on Center Street, to test them out first. So that's kind of the general, but we can get into that next time with how late it is now.
Okay, I think Clancy and Greg would both appreciate being here for that. One thought was just on the dining parklets. I thought I remember Quinn Peterson saying that the downtown Provo had thought through that. They had looked through all, maybe they've gone over this with you, Rob, but they had looked at it and said the places where it would be easiest to put that outdoor dining wasn't close to the places where they would need outdoor dining, and there was a disconnect there. So hopefully you've been talking with Quinn about that too, because they had already thought through that pretty thoroughly, it sounded like.
Yeah, so there were a couple of them, but we did take into account there's some that are kind of in the middle of the block. So there's some on the corners where there already is a vegetated area, a big vegetated area that would make sense for about the size that you'd want for outdoor dining. The one in front of India Palace in particular is one that would make sense. Others are kind of mid-block where there's not that, but we put into, you know, we did a quick cost of what it would take to, if we did that and then pushed out one parking spot, which we still need to go into more detail. The last that I had discussed with Quinn is that it be a case-by-case basis in terms of what's the more important to the restaurant right there, right? Is it more important, if we can only fit something in by taking out one parking spot, is it more important for them to have the parking spot, or is it more important for them to have the outdoor dining? So, like I said, we're still working through, but we're already in the budget process for this year, so we're trying to give some feedback to the administration and council of, you know, kind of what costs they're looking at for different levels of work on Center Street, while still understanding, to get to the final, what exactly are we going to do? We still got to work some things out.
Okay, thank you for that, Rob. Any other final thoughts or concerns from anyone? All right. Do we have a new procedure of how to adjourn, or can we just say, thanks everyone, let's adjourn?
By acclamation.
Okay, great. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Rob, got a couple minutes. About Center Street.